Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm so delighted to invite Avivah Wittenberg-Cox to to our new episode of Phenomenal Founders Conversation. My name is Shivangi Valke. I'm the founder of Thrive with Mentoring, as many of you know. And I have started this series of conversations to offer a platform and also to learn from all these phenomenal founders that we get on the platform, and get all of you to know their work and also ensure that their word is spread. So Avivah is a global expert on all things gender balance. She's the CEO of 21st, a global consulting firm working with companies interested in capturing the competitive advantage of gender. And what I love about Avivah's work is that she's not just talking to companies, she's also speaking to countries. And I saw in her latest TEDx talk that she's also speaking to couples. And as a mother of two boys, quite young, 8 and 12, I'm very, very curious to also explore, how do I create what Avivah calls gender balance, or let's say not gender blind, but gender bilingual leaders and maybe also children. I'm amazed with the amount of, books and articles that Avivah has written for the likes of Harvard and Forbes. And I would highly recommend for you to watch her TED Talks. I've been doing that in preparation for this talk, and it's really prolific, Avivah. You have been, Avivah, also granted the Lifetime Achievement Award for Gender Balanced Leadership. And your book, Why Women Be in Business, interestingly, was on my shelf. and I had not even realized that it was your book. So I guess you have been in this whole area for a very long time. And I'm very, very curious to know from you, and you said that 21st has been around for more than a decade, What made you start this initiative? What was the driver? Like, what were you doing before that? And now, how did you start this initiative, and how has your journey been?
With pleasure. Lovely to be here with you today. How did I start this initiative? Very simply, like many people, I was kind of sideways, right? It was not an ambition of mine all my life to be doing gender consulting. I thought, like many of the ladies on this call, perhaps, that this whole issue was obsolete when I graduated from university or from my MBA. I'm sure you thought this might have been something our mothers had to deal with, right? So I thought it was I was free of this, but I started when I was pregnant, actually, with my second child. I started an informal lunch club for what I called women like us, that were kind of working women who were mothers, who liked men, and who wanted to figure out how to make all of these different things work together. And I ran that for about a decade and became one of the biggest professional women's networks in Europe that still continues as Global PWN today, which I'm very proud of now, more than 20 years later. And so I spent a decade listening to women from all these different countries, cultures, companies about career issues. And this issue that I thought was obsolete turned out to be not obsolete at all. And so it was after spending a decade with women that I decided, well, the issue sounded like it was mostly on the corporate side. And I thought that there needed to be some attention on how do you then help organizations become more gender balanced, understand this new huge wave of female talent moving in to the world. And how could they leverage it and make it work for them, rather than sort of get confused by it, as many of them who were in touch with us at the time were saying.
Thank you for that. I mean, I've heard that, the whole, let's say, diversity related and gender balance sort of training industry is worth a few billion. And it seems that we've been working at balance for a long time. Why do you think, Avivah, is the change so slow?
Because I don't think we've actually started doing the work in most companies that we need to do. So I think part of the problem is the way this issue has been addressed. One of the things that we tried to flip as we moved from doing nonprofit women's empowerment work And moving into the company was to flip the switch inside organizations from what I have called sort of fix the women's strategies, trying to empower women, build their confidence, tell them they can do it, put them together in networks. I don't think we need those things so much anymore. I think now what we need is fix the organization, adapt leadership mindsets, talent management systems, and customer connections and marketing to reflect the reality of a much more gender balanced talent pool and a more gender balanced customer base. And I don't think very many companies yet have really addressed this as a strategic opportunity, which I believe it to be. And they've drowned it in, I think, not very helpful labels and approaches.
That's so true. I mean, the narrative has been around for a long time, diverse teams and gender balanced teams are better for business. What is it that is making, this narrative move from, just understanding something cognitively to changing behavior, right? Why is it that we are getting, even though people like you and you're not the only one, propounding the fact that this is a strategic initiative, this will bring business benefits, why is it that we still get such little commitment, in this space, especially in the corporate world, do you think?
Well, I think there are a number of answers to what you've just said. I don't think it's a blanket. I think it's not quite fair to blanket the corporate world under a single label, right? There are companies that have gender balanced under very smart leadership. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of them. And it's very much about how they frame the issue, whether it's a diversity problem that's handed on to a head of diversity, who usually does not have the power to change anything, is usually a woman, often not of the dominant group, of color, religion, or nationality. So she's an outside group representative who's brought in to help shift the culture of the organization, but doesn't have the power or access or role to do it. How you have to reframe it is to make it a leadership issue, bring it and put it on the agenda of the top team and run it as you would any other business change initiative. There is a small group of what I would call first mover companies that have done that and done it successfully. Why others don't do it is they don't actually buy all the things that you think are obvious, right? That it's better for business, that this is good for their futures, that it's good for leadership. They don't get it. They don't buy it. They're not familiar with those studies. A lot of women are familiar with those studies. A lot of top teams are not, having spent the last 15 years inside rooms with senior executive team members and listening to what they know and don't know about this topic. My takeaway is basically, for most of them, they have never had an honest conversation about this issue amongst themselves as a strategic priority agenda item ever in their lives. So they have not necessarily built the skills, the awareness, and the information they actually would need to lead through a very complex change, right? Gender balancing large organizations is not simple stuff, nor is gender balancing countries. It's emotional, it's complicated. And I'd say the other problem that we've had is up till now, most companies, when they think about fixing the gender balance, they focus all of their efforts on what I would suggest is the wrong half of the population. They focus on women. My suggestion is they focus on their dominant group, which in many organizations is still men.
So how can companies who, let's say, are taking some baby steps toward this, how can they engage men in gender balance?
Well, how they engage men in any change initiative. It's not like companies don't know how to change, right? It's just how badly they want to. And that's the only issue at play, right? And so I think the takeaway is that smart companies have been gaining competitive edge from this, that there's a growing number of stakeholder pressure of all kinds, regulatory pressures from governments, measurements from investors now. There are a bunch of funds and investment asset managers who will no longer invest in organizations that aren't gender balanced in their leadership teams. There's employee pressure, there's media pressure. So the pressure keeps growing, which is impacting how much companies gender balance. Now that pressure is different from country to country and from sector to sector. And so really I always say it's just a question of will and skill. In some companies you have neither. In very few companies do you have both.
So what is a success story that you can share, Avivah, where you felt in the beginning that, and you mentioned will and skill, and I really feel, you really need the combination of those two, but you said that they may even know the data, they might have even read the data, but they don't still buy into that, right? Why is that, you feel? What can be, what is that influence factor there that makes people who may not buy into, some of this is hard facts, right? These are not data that are anecdotal. There is data provided by HBR. At the moment, there is a lot of stuff being done by Lenin with the McKinsey Institute and so on. These are well-known research entities that are providing this data, despite which there is no buy-in. In your work that you have done and with some of your clients, which are success stories, where is the shift? Where is the tipping point and what really happens?
I'd say the issue is never there is no buy-in. The issue generally is there's not enough buy-in. So what you discover when you work with these teams for a long time is that they are not aligned. There's no agreement among people running big organizations whether or not this is a strategic opportunity that's really worth it and whether they buy the data. The data is a little bit more complex than you're suggesting. These are people who deal with lots and lots of numbers and studies, and they know and will tell you, especially the CFOs, that you can do anything you want with data. And what the data does not usually show, although I think there's a recent study that claims to prove it, is it doesn't show causality, right? And so if they're not convinced and they are not super enthusiastic about the idea and you show them these studies that are suggesting correlation, they say, yeah, that's not proof. Show me proof before I move. And what makes smart companies actually move forward is they get and build alignment, understanding, and commitment at the top among the 10 or 15 people who actually have to be convinced in a homogeneous way, and then will work together to drive change across the business. It usually takes really smart, powerful CEO leadership. So you need not a brand new, not a unproven CEO, not a CEO that doesn't have credibility or hasn't proven himself. Usually it's himself. I have rarely had a herself in my experience, which is interesting in itself. And you have to then be able to lead it well, right? And so the companies that have balanced have taken the time, I would suggest, to frame this first and foremost as a leadership issue where they skill and prepare leaders to lead through this kind of situation and then help them do it. And that doesn't mean organizing a women's network or just blithely announcing a completely unrealistic target, like we're going to be 50-50 by 2022.
Yeah. So what is the process of your organization supporting these leaders who may have the will, but maybe not the skill to really align organization, or who may have many naysayers, like you said, causality, but, correlation, but not causality? What is the process in which you or your team work with these organizations?
It's, like most other consulting companies, it's first you get a picture of the existing situation, both qualitatively and quantitatively. So what does the organization look like? What's the current balance across different dimensions that they may care about? We very often work on nationality, gender, generations are other issues that we work with as well. What does it look like today? What do people think about it? What do leaders think about it? How do they frame it in their minds? How urgent or not do they see this? Do they see it as a business issue? Do they see it as a fashionable fad that they can ignore for a few years until the CEO moves on? So a really kind of substantive understanding of what their talent looks like, what their customers look like, what the leadership team looks like. And once you have all that, it's usually about having a no holds barred, correct debate with that leadership team behind closed doors without a whole bunch of HR or women or other people listening to help them debate amongst themselves. Do they want to prioritize this? Do they think it's absolutely crucial for their business, yes or no? And if yes, what is it that they need to learn about the other half of the population they're trying to manage or sell to that they do not know today and aren't aware of? It's not very different when we're working on gender balance and nationality balance, right? There are a lot of top teams that are dominated by one nationality. If it's an American company, it's Americans. Yeah. If it's a German company, it's Germans. If it's an Indian company, it'll be Indians. When they want to try and build, sales and talent in a region in Asia or in China, they're going to go and learn the language and the culture of the Chinese. Well, women is exactly the same. You want to recruit, promote, and sell to an increasingly feminized talent and market base. You got to learn the language and the culture of women.
You said that leaders need to move from being gender blind to gender bilingual. Can you say more about what that difference is?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. So you need to learn about what are the differences between men, women, and the 52 other genders now on tap on Facebook. You need to understand the complexity of the topic, what the differences are, what their expectations are that might be different. Why are women's career cycles different than men's career cycles? Are we going to adapt our entire talent management system to the needs of this population or not? Is it worth it? Do we believe it? Do female customers have different expectations of your brand, your services, your delivery systems than male customers? If yes, what are they? A lot of companies will over sophisticate their custom analyses, and they'll put gender into all of their many lifestyle analyses, but they may not pull out and see if gender is really itself a dramatic differentiator of customer expectations. And if they do, they often are very surprised that there are some really dramatically different expectations by men and women of providers.
I recently saw a TED Talk which actually said that, gender-based marketing has, has some pros, but also many cons. So, I mean, that's quite interesting to think about, pink for girls and blue for boys and, doing all of that. What was it called? The pink tax, which is levied on so many products, and how blatantly, the differentiation of gender-based marketing is, and what are the disadvantages of that. But I want to shift to
but the idea isn't to do so the idea of gender bilingual does not mean that you do gender-based marketing. It means that when you put out an ad, who it's going to include and exclude, who it might alienate or not. Because a lot of companies, they put out ads that they think are going to speak to everyone, but they're unconsciously extraordinarily male normed because that's the culture of the organization for many years. So gender bilingual often means you're going to put out a product that speaks equally effectively to both men and women. That certainly isn't the case for most products today.
That is true. That is true. Well, I wanted to shift a little bit from the corporate to the more family side, right? Because you have mentioned that, as families and as couples, we also have this challenge of how to bring up this next generation. As I mentioned in the beginning, as a mom of two young boys, I'm very keen to hear your perspective on what can we do when our children are younger, less than 10, and then, maybe between 10 and 20, and they're teenagers, which tend to be very precarious, and then maybe, more than 20 years. I mean, what are the sorts of either resources, initiatives, ideas, philosophies that you can share in terms of parents who are interested to, from a young age, bring up more gender bilingual children?
Well, I think that what is the hard truth about parenting is it isn't what you do, it's what you are that your children learn. So almost everything your children are going to really buy and integrate about gender roles comes from the roles their parents inhabit. So you first, if you want to present a different way of running gender balanced couples, you have to look at your own couple. What does it look like? Who has the power? Who dominates? Who makes the money? Who makes the decisions? What do your kids see every day? That's, no matter what you tell them, that's what they're learning. And as we well know, that tends to be what they replicate when they then make their own couples, unless they're convinced to try and do something really, really different. So I think what's interesting is that now that we're seeing around the world the rise of dual career couples everywhere at every level, it really is quite astonishing, right? We've come from about 43% dual career couples in the US among the boomer generation to almost 80% among millennials. I think that's going to have the biggest shift, along, of course, with the also growing rise of shared parental leave in a number of countries and companies. That means that for the first time, really ever, men are going to have a fair shake at fatherhood, which I think is really the ultimate secret to women getting their fair share at leadership.
Thank you. Thank you for that. In terms of your journey, Avivah, for the last 15 odd years with 21st, but even before that, I mean, you've mentioned PWN. What are the sort of things that you expected and then that surprised you? How are you sort of rethinking your journey, and what are your hopes for as you continue this journey?
Well, as I said, I thought my journey was over before I began it. So I was surprised to discover just how long it would take. I think with age, you learn patience, which is sometimes you grow more impatient as well. But I think when you're talking about such fundamental changes as we are, I think I've basically also learned to recast time. A lot of women are incredibly impatient at the pace of change. I think we have revolutionized the world in less than a century. Just think, it's only 100 years ago that we got the vote. 60 years ago, we got the pill. Now we're the majority of labor forces around or fair share of labor forces around the world. It's unbelievable how much we have changed the lives of every man, woman, and child on the planet. So I think these are changes that I expected. When you see the data and you see it evolving and you see women becoming 60% of university graduates, you know that's going to roll out major social change. I think what I have been perhaps astonished by, and maybe not even so much because I was reading Susan Faludi's Backlash when she wrote it 25 years ago, so that 2016 wasn't completely a surprise in the backlash from a lot of men who may not welcome the rise of women, right? It is a huge, huge social change, the equalizing of power between men and women. And if we ever thought that we would get it without a fight, we were dreaming. So I thought, yeah, maybe we would get it without a fight. And I've learned that it's going to take a little bit more fight and a little bit more time than I thought. But we're getting smarter at how we play.
Do you feel that COVID has actually, sort of rewinded some of the work that was being done and some of the advancements that have been made. I mean, there's a lot of narrative around the fact that even if it is a dual career couple, that the woman is taking more the brunt of childcare or elder care or whatever. And because, I mean, everybody was sort of pushed into this globally very, and with very little autonomy, it seems that the gendered roles are coming back. And I don't know, I mean, if you are a part of that couple, what advice would you give, because you're probably facing the brunt of the pandemic right now as we speak.
I think there's been a huge amount of media about all of this. I would remind us all that men are dying more of COVID than women are. So that's rarely mentioned when we're saying that women are suffering more, men are dying more, which I think is a kind of gender balanced inclusion, and men at least mention that in these conversations. And I'm not so entirely convinced. Yes, I think there will be both good and bad, like every crisis has its bad and good repercussions. So yes, many men and women are going to lose their jobs. The last recession in 2008, it was mostly men who lost this job. This, because of the sectors that are being hit, there happen to be female-dominated sectors. I don't think that's necessarily a gender effect. It's a sectoral effect more than it's a gender effect. So okay. I'm a little bit hopeful when I'm listening to what's happening around COVID that what it has done is it's given us all a collective boot in the butt on technology, that we are now all flexible workers. We're now all working from home. This is no longer a female request. And that men all over the planet have learned more than we're saying or acknowledging how to balance working from home and children and cooking and preparing. And if you're not getting that at home, then you've got some work on your couple to do. And yes, absolutely, the struggle for gender balance at home is just as difficult, just as fraught as it is at work. And what do I say to women? Don't give up. Get lots of support. Get a third party in if you need it. Don't settle at home any more than you would settle at work. Ask for equality. You'll have to fight for it. And I think the fight at home right now may be harder than the fight at work. And I think a lot of women are getting empowered at work because they're being recognized and developed and promoted. And that is power that they are bringing home to negotiate.
Definitely.
With their wallets and their power and their exit strategies. Because you know what? 2/3 of divorce are requested by women who, for the first time in human history, are starting to have the financial means to choose whether they stay or go. And I think a lot of men understand that. So do I think things are changing? Oh, they are changing so fast that it's very hard for all of us to keep up, men included. And I think we need to help our couples learn what the consequences of gender balance are at home. It's non-obvious, right? We have not been raised, all of us, with the couples that we have ended up inhabiting. So it takes a little bit of open-mindedness and adjustment on both sides, right? And I think women, how to fight gracefully at home, how to learn inclusion and leadership skills is often women's task at home and men's task at work.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Avivah. This has been very enlightening. I really hope that more and more people, and at least we are sharing with our community, get to read sort of your thoughts around it that have been evolving. I mean, I really enjoyed your analysis on your article that went viral around women-led countries and how they have, managed the pandemic with some real numbers as compared to the male-led countries. And I think those sort of very obvious differences, I'm sure that they start making a difference at all levels, right? At countries, companies, and couples. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And let's keep the conversation going.
With great pleasure. Thanks for having me, Shivangi.
Thank you. Bye for now.